Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another video at my YouTube channel and blog. Today I'm going to be creating a card for you using a new stamp set from Pretty Pink Posh, or it's new to me. It's been out for a little while, but it's definitely fall and autumn themed, and I thought it'd be really fun to do some kind of watercoloring with those colors to create a nice like autumn greetings card. And what's interesting about this card is that I had a particular plan in mind. I was going to use particular products, and then halfway through the thing went south and I had to salvage it. And what's interesting, another thing that's interesting, is that you guys really seem to like to see me mess up. But I think it's because then you see how I course correct and make some changes, change the direction of my card, and then eventually end up with something I'm happy with. And so in that way, you can do the same. If you see a card that you're working on and it's not going well, don't give up, try to change things a little bit. And I think this is a really good example of that particular scenario. So let's get into it. This is a card using a new stamp set from Pretty Pink Posh. So here are the stamp sets that I had planned for my card. I'm using Autumn Wreath, and I'm going to be using that as the main image on my card. And then I brought in this sentiment stamp called Simple Sayings Kind, and I thought it would be really cool to put that large "Thank you for being kind" in the center of the wreath. So I'm going to be doing some watercoloring today, so I'm using some watercolor paper. This is some Fabriano Artistico Extra White watercolor paper, and I'm stamping the wreath in Versamark ink because I'm going to be heat embossing the image and then watercoloring over the top. So I'm pressing that down after I had it inked up, and then I'm going to be applying some embossing powder. So I've got some gilded embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. It's a nice gold shade, and I'm just sprinkling that onto this watercolor paper, making sure I get every single bit of this stamped image. After I've tapped off all that excess, I then grabbed my heat tool and moved around this wreath and made sure everything was melted and there was no powder still hanging around. I want to make sure everything's smooth and melted. So I'm going to stamp the center greeting area, and at this point in the back of my mind I was thinking, that greeting doesn't really fit perfectly. It looks like it's a little bit too big for the wreath, and I should have listened to my intuition, and I didn't. I really wanted to make this work, and I thought, I'm going to make this work. I want this greeting on the inside of this wreath. So I stamped it in Versamark, but because those lines were overlapping with the existing lined artwork of the wreath, I decided to switch up embossing powder colors. So now this is the copper embossing powder from WOW, and I wanted to have a little bit of differentiation between the greeting and the wreath. So I'm taping down my watercolor paper to a board here. It's just going to be a little bit easier as I watercolor here. And I'm going to be using my Magello Mission Gold paints. And I've mixed up a little color palette that's very autumn and fall-esque. And I've got those colors ready to go. And then I added some water all over this entire area. I want these colors to mix and meld. And the best way to do that is to have the surface pre-wet. So I'm adding some of that red shade, and then I'm going to bring in some gold, and I'm going to just move my way around the outside of this wreath, adding some different autumn shades. I've got some browns and reds and yellows and a little bit of green, and making sure those colors are all mixing and melding. And I also brought in more water around the outside edge so I could soften some of those colors. At this point, I thought this would be the card front. I was not planning to cut any of it out, but I was still really irritated with that greeting in the center, that it wasn't like sized up and in proportion to the wreath, at the interior of the wreath. So I hit that with my heat tool to speed up the drying process, and then I brought in those same colors and used those same colors to paint in the different images on the wreath. All of the flowers and leaves and mushrooms and berries, all the different images, I wanted them to have a little bit of a different color. And because I'm painting these directly on the inside of these embossed lines, the embossing contains the paint, so it's a little bit easier to paint. And then also because of that, these colors stay a little bit more intense. They don't have the opportunity to really spread out and lighten. And they're also being painted on top of color that's already there, so it really intensifies the colors and you get a darker shade of color for all of these images. So I'm continuing painting and I'm thinking in my mind, man, I really love this wreath. It's looking great. I'm really not liking that greeting in the center, but I kept going. I was like, I'm going to figure this out. So after I had this entire wreath area painted, I hit that with my heat tool once again. And then I thought, you know what, maybe it just needs a shadow. Maybe it needs a shadow to kind of make this greeting work. So I added a little bit of a shadow by the greeting, and it was looking even worse. I'm like, I think it's time to just admit defeat and get rid of that greeting in the center. So thankfully I had the coordinating dies for the autumn wreath stamp set. So I grabbed that wreath die and I cut it out. I put some tape to hold the wreath in place, ran it through my die cutting machine, and I cut that wreath out. And just getting rid of that greeting in the middle looked so much better to me. So you can still see a little bit of that copper embossing pattern around the inside edge a little bit, but for the most part, it got rid of everything that I wasn't really loving about that initial design idea. So I grabbed a card base. This is some Neenah Desert Storm environmental cardstock, and I folded it in half to create my card base, and then put that in my MISTI stamp positioning tool and stamped the greeting right in the center so that the wreath could go around it. This is the autumn greeting from that stamp set. And I stamped that in Versamark ink, coated it in some gilded embossing powder, the same color that I used for the wreath, and then hit that with my heat tool until it was smooth and melted. And I also heated up the inside of the card just to prevent a little bit of warping. In order to adhere the wreath, I cut my foam tape into a slightly more narrow strip, and I removed the backing sheet or the release paper on both sides, and then that allows me to manipulate the foam and bend it around so that I can put foam tape all along the outside or the back side of this wreath. I then pressed it down onto the card front, and it's a very, very simple card, but I really did enjoy all of that watercoloring. I hope this is a good example of how you can fix a card that's not looking so great. Thanks so much for watching today's card. I hope you guys enjoyed how it eventually got to that finished card design. I thought it was a really fun way to kind of get there. And if you wouldn't have seen the struggle I had, you probably would have never even noticed that other color of embossing powder. It's really subtle. It's hard to even see the change of color there. And I think it just goes to show that sometimes you can hide a multitude of sins when you're working on your cards. So thanks so much for watching today. On screen right now, I've got 2 more cards for you to check out. These are watercolor cards. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a future video. I have my holiday card series coming up very, very soon, and I don't want you to miss it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in another video very soon.